Some songs don't just play on the radio, they cause problems. They get banned, investigated, pulled from shelves, or debated in Parliament. In the 1970s, that happened more than you might remember. Here are 10 controversial songs from the 1970s that got their creator in trouble. Number 10, War by Edwin Starr, 1970. The song started at Motown, but not with Edwin Starr. Norman Whitfield and Barrett Strong wrote War in 1969, and the Temptations recorded it first. Their version appeared on the 1970 album Psychedelic Shack, a blunt, churning anti-Vietnam statement that resonated immediately. Fans, particularly college students and young people active in the protest movement, began flooding Motown with letters asking for the song to be released as a single. Some accounts put the number at more than 4,000 letters. Motown's founder, Berry Gordy, was reluctant. The Temptations were one of the label's crown jewels, and Gordy had built much of Motown's success by keeping the music warm and broadly accessible. Steering clear of material that could divide audiences along political lines, he didn't want them associated with controversy that could cost them radio play or fan loyalty in more conservative parts of the country. So, a compromise was reached. The song would be released, but re-recorded by a different artist, someone whose career could absorb the risk if things went wrong. Edwin Starr volunteered. Starr had come to Motown in 1967 when the label absorbed Rick Tick Records, a smaller Detroit label where he had built a modest following. He had a top 10 hit in 1969 with 25 Miles. But beyond that, he was not considered a priority act. He had everything to gain and relatively little to lose. When Starr recorded the song with producer Whitfield, he was given latitude to perform it his way. The interjections, the "good God, y'all," and the emphatic "absolutely nothing" were his own ad-libs, added live in the studio. Whitfield built the production around Starr's intensity, layering fuzz guitar, driving percussion, and brass into something considerably more volatile than the Temptations' original. War was released as a single on June 10, 1970. It entered the Billboard Hot 100 in July and reached number 1 on August 29, where it stayed for 3 weeks. Billboard ranked it the number 5 song of the entire year. Starr later recalled that while it was at the top of the charts, there were very few venues willing to book him. The very song that made him famous also made him a difficult booking in a country where anti-war sentiment and patriotic sentiment were pulling in opposite directions. Radio stations in conservative markets kept it off the air, even as it sat at number 1 everywhere else. Starr died on April 2, 2003, of a heart attack at the age of 61. The song he recorded as a calculated risk for someone else's label became the only thing most of the world ever needed to know about him. Number 9, Walk on the Wild Side by Lou Reed, 1972.
Holly came from Miami, Philly.
The remarkable thing about this song is not that it was controversial, it is that so few people in a position to ban it understood what it was actually about. Lou Reed had been hired to write songs for a Broadway musical adaptation of Nelson Algren's 1956 novel, A Walk on the Wild Side. The project never came together, but Reed kept the title, rewrote the material, and built a song from the real people he knew through Andy Warhol's Factory, the group of artists, performers, and personalities who orbited Warhol's studio in New York throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s. Each verse of the song is a portrait of a specific person. Holly refers to Holly Woodlawn, a transgender actress who had hitchhiked from Miami to New York as a teenager. Candy is Candy Darling, a transgender actress and regular presence at the factory. Little Joe is Joe D'Alessandro, an actor in several Warhol films. Sugar Plum Fairy is the nickname of actor Joe Campbell. Jackie is Jackie Curtis, a downtown fixture known for her theatrical personality. The song describes their lives in plain, matter-of-fact language. Gender transition, drug use, sex work, and other realities of the underground New York scene. Delivered in Reed's characteristic deadpan. The song was produced by David Bowie and guitarist Mick Ronson and appeared on Reed's second solo album, Transformer, in November 1972. It was released as a single and peaked at number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1973. In the United States, RCA provided radio stations with an edited version that made two changes. It replaced the phrase "colored girls" with "and the girls," and removed a reference to oral sex. Most stations played the original anyway. In the United Kingdom, the BBC played it uncut, reportedly because the censors responsible for reviewing records did not understand the phrase "giving head" and therefore found nothing to object to. The song became Reed's biggest commercial hit. Reed described it in a 1972 interview as an outright gay song, written from me to them, but worded carefully enough that straight listeners could miss the implications. That calibrated ambiguity was exactly what got it through. Number 8, Imagine by John Lennon, 1971.
Imagine all the people.
By the time most people heard it, Imagine sounded like a gentle piano ballad. What it was saying was considerably more provocative. Lennon recorded the album at Tittenhurst Park, his estate in Berkshire, England, in May 1971. He later acknowledged that Yoko Ono's 1964 conceptual art book Grapefruit had directly influenced the song's concept. The idea of asking people to picture a different world rather than demanding one. The album was released in the United States on September 9th, 1971, and the title track peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. The controversy came from what the song asked its audience to imagine: no heaven, no hell, no countries, no religion, no possessions. For much of the American religious right, that opening line was an act of provocation equal to anything the Beatles had said or done. Religious groups accused Lennon of promoting atheism. The Soviet-style undertones of no possessions alarmed conservatives who heard it as communist sympathy. Some commentators pointed out the irony that Lennon was asking people to imagine no possessions from inside an enormous mansion, a contradiction Lennon himself later acknowledged. What made the song's reception complicated is that Lennon didn't entirely disagree with his critics' reading. He described it himself as anti-religious, anti-nationalistic, anti-conventional, anti-capitalistic, and said that because it is sugar-coated, it is accepted. He wasn't trying to smuggle the message past anyone. He simply understood that a gentle melody and an invitation were more effective than an accusation. In the UK, the song wasn't released as a single until 1975, 4 years after the album, and only then did it make the British charts. It reached number 1 in Britain in January 1981, immediately after Lennon's murder. The controversy that had surrounded it in 1971 had by then transformed entirely into something else. Following the September 11th attacks in 2001, Imagine was placed on a Do Not Play list issued by Clear Channel Communications to its radio affiliates, making it one of the very few songs to attract institutional restriction in 2 separate decades. Number 7, Brown Sugar by the Rolling Stones, 1971. Mick Jagger wrote this song in a back room at Muscle Shoals Sound Studio in Muscle Shoals, Alabama in December 1969, reportedly in under an hour. It was recorded there over 3 days and released as the lead single from the album Sticky Fingers in April 1971, where it went to number 1 in the United States and reached number 2 in the United Kingdom. The song's subject matter was not hidden. The lyrics move through scenes of slavery and sexual exploitation in explicit terms. A slave ship, a slave market in New Orleans, a slave owner, violence, and the sexualization of black women in language that pulled no punches. At the time of its release, a number of radio stations declined to play it. Civil rights groups objected. The song was played anyway on most stations, and it became one of the band's biggest hits. What made the controversy different from most is that it didn't peak in 1971. It stayed in the Stones' live set for 50 years, performed at virtually every concert they gave. By the time Jagger himself told Rolling Stone magazine in a 1995 interview that he would never write that song now, the song had already been performed live more than 1,000 times and had been heard by tens of millions of people. That statement, made casually, almost in passing, became the admission that followed the song everywhere afterward. In 2021, the Rolling Stones quietly dropped Brown Sugar from the set list of their American tour. Keith Richards, in interviews, said he was confused about why anyone wanted to bury the song. Jagger was more measured. The song has not appeared in a Stones concert since. Number 6, The Pill by Loretta Lynn, 1975. Loretta Lynn recorded this song in 1972. Her record label, MCA, held it for 3 years before releasing it, and even then they were braced for what was coming. The song was written by Laureen Allen, Don McCann, and T.D. Bayless, along with Lynn herself. It tells the story of a married woman who has spent years pregnant, exhausted, and stuck at home while her husband does as he pleases, and who has now gained access to the birth control pill, and with it, the freedom to make her own choices. The language was clear, the humor was sharp, and the message was unmistakable. When The Pill was finally released as a single in early 1975, 60 country radio stations across the United States refused to play it. A preacher in West Liberty, Kentucky, devoted an entire Sunday sermon to denouncing Loretta Lynn and her song. And according to People magazine at the time, his condemnation sent much of his congregation straight to the record store to buy a copy. Lynn was told that the Grand Ole Opry had held a 3-hour meeting debating whether to let her perform it on stage. When she found out later, she said that if they had told her she couldn't sing it, she would have told them to shove the Opry. The song reached number 5 on the Billboard Country Singles chart and became her highest charting solo pop single, peaking at number 70 on the Hot 100. It sold 15,000 copies a week without airplay from the stations that had banned it. Lynn, for her part, never understood what all the fuss was about. "It's a husband and wife," she said. "The wife is saying, 'You've kept me barefoot and pregnant all these years while you've been slipping around.'" Over the course of her career, a total of 14 of Loretta Lynn's songs were banned from country radio. The Pill was the most commercially successful of all of them. Lynn died in October 2022 at the age of 90. Number 5, The Jean Genie by David Bowie, 1972.
Small Jean Genie snuck off to the city.
David Bowie released The Jean Genie in November 1972, midway through his Ziggy Stardust period, and it went to number 2 in the United Kingdom. Its title was a play on the French novelist Jean Genie, whose work explored themes of criminality, homosexuality, and social transgression. The song itself drew from several sources at once: the blues, glam rock, the New York underground, and described a kind of feral, rootless character drifting through American cities. The visual presentation Bowie brought to his performances during this period was deliberately confrontational. The costumes, the makeup, the onstage personas, all of it pushed against the boundaries of what a male rock performer was expected to look like or suggest. A number of radio programmers in both the United States and the United Kingdom were uncomfortable with Bowie's public persona and reduced airplay for his material as a result, though no formal ban was issued. What became more concrete was the response from conservative audiences and certain media outlets who treated Bowie's androgyny as a provocation to be answered. Bowie had publicly stated in a January 1972 interview with Melody Maker that he was gay, the first time a mainstream British rock star had said so in a major music publication. He later clarified that statement over the years, but the declaration had already produced a reaction. Radio programmers, who might have otherwise ignored a provocative lyric, found that Bowie's entire public image gave them a reason to be cautious. The Jean Genie became a hit in spite of reduced airplay in conservative markets, and remains one of his most recognized recordings from that period. Number 4, God Save the Queen by the Sex Pistols, 1977.
God save the Queen!
The BBC banned this record on May 31st, 1977, 4 days after its release, issuing a public statement that the song was in gross bad taste. They were not alone. The Independent Broadcasting Authority banned it from all stations it regulated. Major retailers, including Boots, W.H. Smith, and Woolworths, refused to stock it. Workers at the pressing plant had laid down tools in protest during manufacturing. The band's manager, Malcolm McLaren, had reportedly told his staff to say nothing about the release date to the wrong people, aware that the whole thing could be shut down before it started. The song had been recorded under the title No Future and retitled when it became clear that the release date would coincide with Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee celebrations. The cover art showed the Queen's face obscured by cutout lettering in ransom note style, and the lyrics were a direct assault on the British establishment, the government, the monarchy, and what the band saw as the manufactured pageantry of a country in decline. Members of Parliament made public statements calling for a ban on sales. Virgin spokesman responded that it was remarkable MPS had nothing more urgent to do. The Sex Pistols had already burned through 2 record labels before any of this happened. EMI dropped them after guitarist Steve Jones swore on live television during a Bill Grundy interview in December 1976, an incident that made front pages the following morning. A&M signed them outside Buckingham Palace in March 1977 and dropped them 6 days later following a series of incidents involving band members at the label's offices. Almost all 25,000 copies of the A&M pressing were destroyed. Surviving copies became among the most sought-after records in British music history, with individual copies later selling for thousands of pounds. The band then signed with Richard Branson's Virgin Records. When the single was banned, McLaren arranged for the band to perform on a hired riverboat called the Queen Elizabeth, sailing down the Thames past the Houses of Parliament on June 7, 1977, the evening before the Silver Jubilee's official bank holiday. Police boats intercepted the vessel before it could dock. Officers boarded. McLaren was arrested coming down the gangplank after shouting at police. Several others were also detained that evening. Sales of God Save the Queen immediately increased. The song is widely believed to have outsold every other release during the week of June 7, 1977, but it was not awarded the #1 position on the official UK chart. A blank line appeared in the second spot where the Pistols' entry would have been. Rod Stewart's I Don't Want to Talk About It held the top position that week. Whether the chart was deliberately adjusted remains disputed. but many in the British music industry at the time believed the song had been kept off number 1. It went to number 1 on the NME chart. The Sex Pistols broke up in January 1978 at the end of a chaotic American tour at a concert in San Francisco. The entire active career of one of the most consequential bands in British music history lasted approximately 2.5 years. Number 3, Lola by the Kinks, 1970. The story of why Lola was banned has almost nothing to do with the story most people tell about why it should have been banned. The Kinks recorded Lola in early 1970 and released it in June of that year. Ray Davies wrote the song about a man's encounter with a woman at a nightclub in London. A woman who, the song gradually makes clear, may not have been born a woman. The subject matter was unusual for mainstream pop radio, and Davies had written it with enough wit and ambiguity that it was embraced widely. In the United States, no significant effort was made to keep it off the air. In the United Kingdom, the BBC banned it, but not for the reason anyone expected. The BBC had a policy against using song lyrics to commercially endorse specific products or brands. The original recording of Lola contained a reference to a well-known soft drink. Under BBC rules, broadcasting that lyric constituted free advertising, which the corporation would not permit. Davies flew from the United States, where the Kinks were on tour, back to London, re-recorded a single line replacing the brand name with the generic Cherry Cola, and returned to finish the tour. The revised version was cleared for airplay. Lola reached number 2 in the United Kingdom and number 9 in the United States. What gets lost in the story of the BBC ban is how genuinely unusual the song was for 1970. The gender ambiguity at the heart of it was played with warmth rather than judgment, and it reached a mass audience without apology or explanation. Davies never tried to clarify exactly what the song meant or didn't mean. He let it stand as he had written it. Decades later, it became recognized as a landmark recording in discussions of LGBTQ plus representation in popular music, an outcome that had nothing to do with the BBC's original concern about soda brands. Number 2, Love to Love You Baby by Donna Summer, 1975. Donna Summer recorded the original version of this song for producer Giorgio Moroder and Pete Bellotte in Munich in 1975. Summer had been living in Germany for several years, performing in musical theater productions, and her collaboration with Moroder was still new. The first recording ran for roughly 3.5 minutes. When Casablanca Records head Neil Bogart heard it at a dinner party, he asked Summer and Moroder to extend it so he could play it as background music for the evening. Summer reportedly recorded the extended vocal in near darkness in the studio, in something close to a trance state. She was 26 years old. The extended version ran to approximately 17 minutes. The BBC banned the full version from daytime airplay immediately, citing its sexual content. The moaning and sighing that carried much of the track were considered too explicit for broadcast during daylight hours. Several American radio stations declined to play it at all, while others restricted it to late-night programming. The BBC's position created a practical outcome. Casablanca released a shorter edited version for radio, the version most people heard on AM stations, while the full-length recording circulated in clubs. The distance between the radio edit and the full version became part of the record's reputation. People sought out the longer version because they knew it existed and had been kept from them. Love to Love You Baby reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1976. The format it helped introduce, a single stretched far beyond the conventional 3-minute structure specifically for the dance floor, became one of the defining characteristics of disco. The idea that a song could exist in fundamentally different versions for different contexts, one sanitized for radio and one uncut for clubs, had existed before, but no record did more to normalize that split than this one. The controversy over its content did nothing to slow that development, and Summer's career accelerated from that moment forward. The irony is that Summer herself was a deeply religious woman who later spoke about the conflict she felt between that recording and her Christian faith. The persona the song created for her, the Queen of Disco, was one she wore with professional commitment and personal ambivalence for years afterward. Number 1, Working Class Hero by John Lennon, 1970.
A working class hero is something to be.
This was the first song on Lennon's debut solo album, John Lennon / Plastic Ono Band, released in December 1970, and it was banned by the BBC almost immediately. The ban had a simple cause. The track contained 2 uses of a word the BBC would not broadcast. The word appeared in the original recording, was not edited out, and Lennon had no intention of removing it. He was making a point, and the language was part of the architecture of the song. The album emerged from Lennon's experience of primal scream therapy with psychologist Arthur Janov, which he began at Tittenhurst Park in England in early 1970 and continued in Los Angeles over the following months. The therapy encouraged patients to confront and release deeply buried emotional pain from childhood, and its effect on Lennon was significant. The entire album was shaped by that process, raw, spare, and deliberately stripped of the studio craft that had characterized Beatles records. There are no orchestras on John Lennon / Plastic Ono Band, no layered harmonies, no production concealing what is being said. Just Lennon's voice, Klaus Voormann on bass, and Ringo Starr on drums, recorded with producer Phil Spector in sessions that were emotionally difficult for everyone involved. Working Class Hero emerged from that stripped-down environment as one of the album's most direct statements. It is an acoustic song, just Lennon and a guitar, that moves through the way class systems shape people from birth, the education that teaches compliance, the distractions that prevent awareness, the reward structure that keeps most people exactly where they started. It was angry in a way that Lennon's Beatles work rarely had been, delivered without the melodic warmth that usually cushioned his sharper observations. The BBC's ban on the track meant it received no mainstream radio play in Britain. That did not prevent the album from reaching number 11 in the UK and number 6 in the United States. The Lennon / Ono session recordings from that period also documented something separate from the music: conversations, reflections, and emotional exchanges that became part of the historical record of who Lennon was during that particular chapter of his life. The song has been covered many times. Marianne Faithfull recorded it in 1979. Green Day's version reached number 1 in Ireland in 2007. In each case, the song found a new generation that recognized what it was describing. The BBC's decision to keep it off British radio in 1970 meant that many listeners first heard it not on the radio, but from the record itself, passed between people who thought someone else needed to hear it. The 1970s produced music that governments tried to silence, broadcasters refused to air, and retailers declined to sell. In almost every case, the attempts to contain these songs only pushed them further into the culture. Some of the artists paid a personal or professional price for what they recorded. Some didn't, but the songs survived, and most of them are still here. If you enjoyed this one, hit the like button and subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.